You're listening to Living in Spain podcasts with David Wright.
Hi, David Wright here, and welcome to another one of my podcast shows. It's January the 10th, and I just want to talk a little bit about going back from Spain. So yeah, I see a lot of posts on my groups, my websites, about people saying, thinking about going back, or, you know, if people make a decision to go back to the UK after living in Spain for a few years or so. So here's my thoughts on this one. So yeah, this summer I'll be 22 years living and working in Spain, and I've pretty much seen it all, done it all, and got the t-shirt. But here's what I've seen with regards to people that have moved over here from the UK and are thinking about moving back, or have actually moved back to the UK. Now, there is many different reasons for this, but I really think it's really only down to two real reasons. One is possible health issues, and the other one is that people haven't managed to make a success of it here in Spain. They've lost all their money, and they think they're going back is going to be better. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples on this. Many years ago when I first moved here, I did some work for a couple here, and it was an elderly couple, and they had a house not far from where I lived here in Spain then, in the Almeria area. And this lady and husband, lovely couple, been here for several years before me, and they were living a great life here. They absolutely loved it here. Didn't have any family in the UK. They had some distant relations. I think it was grandchildren, but they used to come over and visit. They didn't see them that often, to be honest, but they were loving their life here. Then after just a short time of me meeting this couple, the husband died suddenly of a heart attack, and the lady was in her 70s, and she had no thoughts about going back at all, even though her family contacted her and said, you know, you should come back now, come back. But she was adamant she was going to stay, make her life here in Spain. Her husband had wanted that. They had a great time here. So she was going to continue. And that she did for several years here, until one day, I'll just tell you that her life here after her husband's death was great. She was still driving. She was very, very active. She was out a lot of the week, probably 3 or 4 times a week, meeting people, just walking up to the shops to see people. She was also going out and having coffee mornings with different people. She would go out in her car and drive up to half an hour or an hour away from where she lived to go and see other people that were living here that she'd be friends with over the years. And she had a pretty great life. There was no way she was moving back. Then her family started to come and visit her. This was their idea. She loved seeing them and their grandchildren and things like that, which she hadn't seen for some time, and she became quite close to the family then. So go forward a few years, and one day she said to me that she was thinking about moving back. The grandchildren wanted her to see more of her. They weren't coming out as often as they should. They were coming out a couple of times a year. Although they loved it out here, and she had a nice house with a swimming pool and everything, they wanted her to come back. So begrudgingly, she said she wants to move back, and it was a real awkward decision because she didn't really want to do it, and I knew she was doing it for them. Anyway, one of her distant relatives became ill. He was living on his own, and so she said she's going to go back and help look after him, which she did. So she sold her property here in Spain. She lost a lot of money on the property, and she went back and she ended up moving up to Newcastle area, where she bought a much smaller property than she had here, and it needs some work doing. So she spent all of her savings doing that up, and this person that was not too good, gentleman, relation of hers, was moving in with her. She was looking after him, and first year or so it was quite good company. And then unfortunately he died, and she was out on her own. The grandchildren didn't come and visit as often as she wanted. The weather was dark, cold, windy. She didn't like going out. She didn't feel safe where she was going out, especially in the evenings. She didn't drive anymore in the UK. And after 3 years, she ended up dying in her sleep one day. So this was a sad story. I think if she'd stayed here, she was more active here. She had a more outdoors life. She loved the weather, the lifestyle here. She was much more happy here, and it was a shame. Now, that is just one story. Now, there was another story. There was a guy that I worked with when I first moved here. He set up a business here doing welding and security grills for people here. He was English. married with a young daughter. The daughter loved it here. So did he and his wife. They got on really well here. But he was struggling money-wise. He'd bought a house a bit bigger than he should have done. He bought a bit of ground and a workshop. And he started taking less interest in his business and more interested in going out drinking with his friends, which put a strain on his marriage and his business as well. He was turning up late for jobs. It became very awkward. I was giving him work at the time and he was letting down my customers, so I had to find somebody else. And it was inevitable in the end. His business went very downhill very fast and he lost a lot of money. The money was a big thing for him. He didn't speak Spanish. His daughter loved it at school. She spoke fluent Spanish. They'd been here for about 5 or 6 years. In the end, his wife said, we need to go back. They cut their losses. They shut the house up here and it's still boarded up, and they just give the keys back to the bank, walked away from the property, went back to the north of England where he got his old job back, working in a factory doing welding. I did get a message from him to say that, it was a big mistake. He'd made an error with his drinking here, let all the business down and everything, and now he was living his nightmare life, from a dream life here in Spain to his nightmare life. He'd actually gone back to doing his old job for the same company, and he was not happy at all. Totally lost touch with him, but that was the second one to go back. Now, there was one other a family here. They were retired people here, living here, well into golf. They loved it here. They had a big family that come over and see them. They had a nice house here. They loved their life here. And then their relationships come out and visit them a lot, and they were all very happy. The life was great here. Both the husband and the wife that were retired here had lots of things to do, lots of hobbies, and they were always pottering around the house and things like that, meeting people, having people over, and they loved it. Typical British expats in Spain, retired. They didn't speak a lot of Spanish, either of them, very little in fact, but they managed to have an enjoyable life here in Spain. And then one of them became a little less healthy, should we say, had some health issues, and they were having some trouble with the treatment here because of their lack of Spanish. They were paying somebody to go and help them with the medical treatment and things like that. The treatment was great here. Everything was just a bit of a stress with them driving to and fro the doctors here and the hospitals and a clinic. They had to go for some basic treatment. It wasn't a serious illness. And finally, they decided that they'd sell up. Now, they sold up a lovely property here. They didn't get much for the property. They did make a little bit of money, but they went back to the UK and they ended up buying a smaller house than they originally had in the UK, and had all the family and friends around them. Now, I know that these people had a close-knit family and they got a big family, but it seems a shame that they gave up being very happy here. Maybe they are happy there. I don't quite see why, because the medical treatment in the UK is probably not as good as it is here in Spain. It was probably, I feel, the language barrier that made them move back to the UK, but I think they're fairly happy there with their family and everything, but it just seems a shame that, they went back there. Their family were coming out to visit, their relatives were coming out to visit and have a great time when they were out here. In fact, I think they spent more time with their grandchildren when they were out here on a 2-week holiday than they do now with them being back in the UK. But there you go. So I never feel it's a good idea to go back after you live in here in Spain. And after the crisis I think it was 2008 or no, it was 2000 and I can't remember now, the Spanish crisis here, when all the building work dried up and it was a world economic crisis. Then, I struggled here as well. And I did think about it at the time. I thought about, I'd gone through a divorce at the time. My work had dried up quite a bit and I was struggling to pay my big mortgage I had at the time, because I had a house here with my wife who'd gone through a divorce. So that was all on me now. And work dried up. Customers weren't having the work done. So I really had to double down. And at a time I did think, when I was at my lowest, I'll just sell it up and I'll go back, and I would have gone back to nothing. I would have had nothing, no money. I would have lost most of my money here in the business and my house, and I would have probably moved in with my parents, at 40 odd years of age. not a good thought at all. But I thought, well, I can go back and start again. But I thought at the time, well, look, what's the point of going back? I'm going to start from nothing. I'm pretty much at nothing here. Even if I got rid of the house here, which I did, I sold the house at a loss of €80,000. I got myself a small place, just enough for me, and I struggled for 2 years here to get back on my feet. And time goes quickly when you're working hard, and things built up again, and I built up the business again, got myself a little bit better place to live in, and that's when I met my Spanish wife, and we moved in together, and a few years later we got married, and now I'm living in a house that we bought together, which we built off plan. We bought a plot of land and built the house together, and I'm living my dream life here. So yeah, I'm glad I didn't go back. So I never think it's a good idea to go back in relationships or in circumstances. It's always better to just change your direction a little bit, maybe knuckle down a little bit and push ahead, because there's always a silver lining if you keep trying to find solutions to problems. So yeah, that's my thoughts on going back. So I personally don't think it's a good idea. I think even if you're having a bad time here, just think about what you're doing here, sell up everything you got and start again. Here is the same as going back and starting again in the UK. And remember, it's always nicer here being poor in the sunshine than being poor in the wind and rain. That's my view anyway. So yeah, I hope this information has helped. And remember, I've got loads more information over on my main website. That's davidwrightonline.com, davidwrightonline.com, and 2 new radio shows now. You can see the link in the description box below this podcast. Thanks for listening, and please leave a comment.
If you have enjoyed this podcast by David Wright, then you will love his new books. Out now on Amazon and Kindle, packed with money-saving tips and information on living and working in Spain. Just go to livinginspainbooks.com. David also has a popular blog for expats in Spain. Come and take a look now at britishexpatsinspain.com.